everyone, it's another year and we get to talk about the Meta Quest 2 once again in the year of 2025. Now, the big thing to keep in mind here is that, in my personal opinion, I think a Meta Quest 2 is still a very, very good device for the most part. If you don't have any type of VR headset at all, then buying something like this could still make a lot of sense, right? It's a VR headset. It allows you to go on, use applications, play a lot of games. And I would say this is a really good type of middle ground between actually having like a good quality headset and still getting something that can actually be practical and you can use it and not have to spend a ton of money on it. The thing with the Meta Quest 2 is that it doesn't cost as much as it used to, right? This thing you can buy, apparently you can buy in the used market for quite a bit and for a lot less. It's maybe at less than $200 all over the place. That can be a very decent type of price to pay for a device like this when it comes down to it. Now, if you do want to pick up the Meta Quest 2, links will be down in the description below. You can get it from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, since the last year, there's been a lot of development for Meta Quest in general, so we'll try to hit on all those things. But number one, when you look at the exterior of the Meta Quest 2, this is a very interesting type of layout. Number one, this thing was sold by Meta, it used to be called the Oculus Quest 2, and this thing used to cost around $400. So there was a cheaper model for $399, but the most expensive one was about $430. Now at that point, that's not a super cheap price to pay, but when you kind of think to the back of your head that this thing has basically, it was that price, but now it's gone down quite a bit, it kind of changes your perspective a little bit, just a little bit on this type of device. Now, we're looking on the front side, there's not really too much. You just get the cameras that are embedded on the side of it. You're also on the side getting the standard strap. You're able to strap this thing around your, head all over the place. But the thing with the Meta Quest 2, and the biggest complaints I think a lot of people had with this, was basically the size of this particular headset. This headset was a pretty big size, and when you put it on your head, it actually, you could see it took a lot of heft to it to basically hold it up. So that was kind of one of the problems that a lot of people were somewhat experiencing within this type of device. So although it was not the biggest tool in the world, that would be one of the more concerning aspects of this type of device. A lot of people would look at it and they'd be like, hey, what? This thing is so big. That'd be the number one complaint people would have of something like the Meta Quest 2. Beyond that, though, you had, the ability of looking through the lenses and be able to see it and, mess around with it. You also had the controllers attached to your Meta Quest. They weren't attached, but they were connected. And I will say this was a really nice area of this particular device. You were able to go through and use the controllers, but you could also use your hands as well. And that was something I really did appreciate a lot about my Meta Quest, was that you could actually go through and you use your Meta Quest without having to go through and use your actual controllers. I think the controllers were one of those areas of this type of device that some people liked, some people didn't, but that in and of itself was another really cool thing going on for this type of device when it comes down to it as well. Now, beyond that, that's kind of the exterior and the hardware. The thing that we did experience in the biggest news that kind of came out last year about the Meta Quest was that we did end up getting the Meta Quest 3S. So this thing is like a, cheap alternative to the Meta Quest 3, the standard 3. And it's supposed to be a kind of an entry-level, headset. And with that particular headset, right, I would say it's arguably a better headset than something like Meta Quest 2. So if you're going to go through and buy something like the Meta Quest 3S, you are going to be getting a device that's going to be giving you a little bit of a better experience when it comes down to its capability, when it comes down to its power and its longevity. And the fact that Meta just made that was a really nice thing going on for that type of headset. I really, really did like the Meta Quest 3S. But with the Meta Quest 2, this thing now being in the used market is actually a cheaper priced alternative to a Meta Quest 3S. The 3S is more powerful and you're going to be getting more capability there, and that would be the one I'd recommend more. But the 2 is actually cheaper now. So because of that, it might make more sense for some people to buy a Meta Quest 2 in some situations. Again, that would not be my, theory. I would not recommend doing that per se, but still it is kind of an interesting kind of thing to think about here and there. Now, another thing that I like about the Meta Quest 2, if you're not familiar with Meta Quest in general, these things are standalone type of machines, meaning you don't have to have a pre-existing machine to go and kind of use it. You could go through and just use it as its own machine. You don't have to connect it to a different device. You don't have to do anything like that. And I genuinely think that's a really nice kind of thing to think about there with that type of layout. The fact that you don't have to go through and use your Meta Quest, you don't have to connect it to a PlayStation or an Xbox or anything like that. It's its own standalone machine. And that's always something I liked about it. There are tons of games and there are tons of applications you can still download on your Meta Quest 2, and you can connect it to your PC to get even a little bit more type of capability on that side as well. So I've always liked it and I've always appreciated that type of phone from that type of layout, just because it was giving you a ton of different type of capability when it came down to it. However, like I said, the main issue you're going to be experiencing with the Meta Quest 2 for this day and age is basically the fact that the hardware is a little bit outdated. Again, compared to like if you're coming from no headset at all, I think the Meta Quest 2 still has still going to be giving a really good type of experience, right? But if you actually are coming from like a different type of VR headset, you might be noticing that, some things might be a little bit slower here, especially if you're watching comparisons and reviews of like other headsets compared to the Meta Quest 2. You might be noticing probably the number one complaint is the size, as well as just maybe a little bit of a dated hardware situation. But like I said, if you're not coming through with anything, if you're not coming from a different headset, then you're not going to notice a big difference. But the biggest difference, my personal biggest difference that I will notice, is the pass-through. So the Meta Quests all have cameras, right? So it allows you to kind of see your environment. It allows you to see all the, things that you're looking at. If you need to make your boundary box, you can make that. But the thing here is that the boundary box of the Meta Quest 2 is all grayscale. So it's not that clear. It looks very, very outdated. Whereas on the new ones, even the Meta Quest 3S, their cheaper alternative, that one is actually going to be giving you full color pass-through. It is basically like a phone camera just attached to your particular Meta Quest, and you can see everything around you in color. It is a very big difference. This in and of itself would actually make me want to go through and upgrade to something like a Meta Quest 3S. It's a very big difference. Maybe you might not care about it, especially if you're not looking through the camera all the time, but that is one thing I did notice, and you might end up noticing it as well. I would say beyond that though, there are still, if you don't care about those things, it is a really, really nice type of device to have. And the fact that it's so cheap, makes me think that this could be a very good budget entry to the, headset series. Like if you never came from any sort of headset before, if you're not familiar with them or anything like that, I think it could make a lot of sense for you to go and buy something like a Meta Quest 2 if it's your first entry or first foray into getting a VR or AR headset. I think the problems with the Meta Quest 2, like I stated, are basically the things like the hardware being a little bit outdated, the headset itself being a little bit outdated, kind of being too heavy maybe to use sometimes. Some people did mention the battery life not being that great, but that never really bothered me too much because I usually have it plugged in. I'm sitting down and using it plugged in, but you can also still get up and use it around without it even plugging it in. But I think my biggest issue, probably the biggest gripe, is probably the full color pass-through or the lack thereof, right? No color pass-through on the Meta Quest 2. It's like available on every single Meta Quest after the Meta Quest 2, which is funny. So that's kind of how I feel about it. I think it's still worth buying for the most part, but even if you plan on using it for a couple of years, I think there are still a couple of years you can use out of this thing. But even if you only want to use it for like a year or two, it's still very, very decent as well. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there for the most part. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.